Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Just in time for Christmas. I've been teasing this video for a very long time, and I thought it would be very fitting because I love Christmas. I love this time of year. It's so colorful and beautiful. But this video has went through several rewrites and several different attempts to get it just right. Everybody, welcome back to another video. After 10 different attempts and multiple long nights trying to do this, and pulling
all-nighters hurts my fucking body.
After multiple all-nighters and trying to get this video done, I finally got one where I'm relatively happy with it. Because I love Tim Burton and I love Nightmare Before Christmas. There's only two different games that really exist, The Pumpkin King and Oogie's Revenge. And that's really what inspired me to make this video and come up with my own concept for a new modern Nightmare Before Christmas video game. Taking aspects from what came before, but also simultaneously taking certain types of gameplay that you would think would fit well in this unique Nightmare Before Christmas video game. Obviously, with Tim Burton's unique style and also other different games that came before it, it wouldn't be too hard to kind of mix what The Pumpkin King and Oogie's Revenge did well, while also taking other elements with a lot of different callbacks to those games and improving on them in a lot of different aspects, especially with it being a prequel, and you can really do it justice, starting with gameplay. Let's kick things off with gameplay. Now, obviously, I'm going to have this be a collage-podge of a lot of different games like Devil May Cry, Arkham, and the original Nightmare Before Christmas games. I'm especially going to be taking a lot of notes from Oogie's Revenge and The Pumpkin King, and also games like Coraline and a few others to take notes from those old movie tie-in games, especially games like Monster House. Comes to aesthetic and horror, and also certain aspects of gameplay, because obviously I want to have that unique Tim Burton flair when it comes to this game. Now, if you were to open up the main menu, obviously, fairly similar to Hogwarts Legacy, it opens up like a book, hitting the main button on the D-pad. Now, obviously, when you get to the main menu, there is a book that you can keep track of your story, fairly similar to Guardians of the Galaxy or Uncharted. And you have other tabs. Obviously, you can pull up your map, which I'll get into exploration and other stuff a little bit later. But when you pull up this map, obviously, it's shaped like a Ouija board, and the more you explore, fairly similar to Minecraft, the electricity effect would turn the map from a hand-drawn drawing into what the map actually looks like. Fairly similar to how Minecraft does it, with the more you explore, it reveals more of the map. Then we get into our other tabs, like the Items and Actions tab. Now, this is a tab that keeps track of your actions and your items, and also you can brew potions in this tab, where actions can actually be upgraded for your potions and stuff like that. Potions can be brewed in this menu and other stuff. You can keep track of your ingredients, and kind of similar to Hogwarts Legacy, you can make a bunch of potions to heal, to use in combat, and your traversal. Your items can also be tracked in this category as well, keeping track of items that you can use in combat, but also side items that you can find around the story. Actions can actually be upgraded for potion effects or different side weapons, which I will get into in your gameplay and combat section. Now let's move on to your upgrades and other various stuff. Now you have a total of 5 different tabs. Some of the smaller tabs are to correlate with your different forms, which I'll get into that later, and also you have different combat options that you can upgrade and different traversal options. The upgrade menu is just that. The bigger tabs are more for different other options, like your combat and traversal. And speaking of traversal, let's actually get into that now. When it comes to the traversal and the map of this game, Halloween Town should be very dense. Obviously, I'm going to be taking a lot of notes from Tim Burton, and there's also a lot of obscurity when it comes to Halloween Town. So it leaves a lot of creative freedom when it comes to Halloween Town, and also the ways I could approach it, making it this complex maze, very similar to Oogie's Revenge and also The Pumpkin King, with a lot of different ways you can go about it. So obviously, I want to add familiar locations, but also I want to add some new stuff. Halloween Town is this complex, almost unique structure actual place, so adding some puzzles and some dungeon-like format, very similar to Darksiders and Oogie's Revenge, should actually add some density to the traversal system, and each form is fairly unique to traverse with. And I actually want to take some notes from Arkham, and being able to use your potions and different abilities, fairly similar to Hogwarts Legacy, the more Metroidvania style that the Pumpkin King tried to do when it came to the map design. I wanted to take a very similar approach, with some Hogwarts Legacy influence in Arkham City and also other elements thrown in there to kind of mix it up. I do want to take a bit of a dungeon format, but unlike Oogie's Revenge, where there was just a lot of backtracking and stuff like that, I actually wanted to pull from Darksiders 3 with the ability to use your other forms, traversal abilities, to actually access new areas, because I feel that that would be a lot better, giving you more reason to use these other forms outside of combat and puzzles. Taking a lot of notes from Darksiders and the Pumpkin King when it comes to elements of exploration. I'm going to be taking a lot of influence from Batman Arkham City, making Halloween Town a very layered map, having different levels, being able to go on rooftops, street level, and also into a sewer-like area. Fairly similar to Arkham City, there is a sewer type area to going underneath the map. So it adds a lot more exploration and a lot more different elements to the game. There are two different types to the underground side of things. You have like the sewer-like area of the catacombs. There are also secret entrances that function very similar to the serpent holes or the doors from God of War. These would be the catacombs. Secret doors are fairly similar to the way Jack got back into Halloween Town in the movie, but this time it's a little different. You can find these scattered around the map. That also can take you back into the sewer-like areas where there's only two entrances, fairly similar to Arkham City, but these act like secret doors that can get you to any part in the map. Fairly similar to like a fast travel system with some added flair. The underground area of Halloween Town and the catacombs are fairly connected, but they operate a little differently. Where the catacombs operate very similar to a fast travel system, but they also can connect you to the underground areas. The underground areas are just that, the abyss of Halloween Town, fairly similar to the sewers. And actually, let's get into the traversal system. It's going to be pulling a lot from the DMC reboot, being able to use your weapons in traversal, while also taking elements from Arkham and Darksiders and Oogie's Revenge. Taking the idea of your shape-shifting weapons being able to help you out in traversal from DMC, I like the idea of Halloween Town and your traversal of Jack being fairly similar to that. Your main weapon being your sign, being enchanted with Halloween magic, can actually help you get past large gaps, jump up different things, and it's enchanted with Halloween magic, so I believe it wouldn't just help you in combat, it would also help you in traversal, getting around different aspects of the map. Similar to the drop near spear, you'd be able to launch it into walls, or like Robin's staff, and swing on them to get to different parts of a building, and you can also swing off a bolt with your scythe, and some aspects of traversal would taking a lot of notes from Darksiders 2 with the way you can jump around and other stuff. Using potions, using your other forms, and taking a lot of notes from the Pumpkin King and Oogie's Revenge, seeing the platformer and Metroidvania elements with different aspects of exploration, where you can actually trade with witches like you could in Oogie's Revenge to make different potions and also find different collectibles like candy corn, Halloween tokens, and crystal skulls that could help you out with your upgrades in combat. And speaking of combat, let's actually get into that. Now, when it comes to combat, I want it to be a mixture between a lot of different things, having the movement and the flicking of the wrist of Hogwarts Legacy, with the idea of switching forms from Darksiders 3, with the core basis being from Oogie's Revenge. Consider the combat an upgraded version of what we got from Oogie's Revenge, with a lot more Devil May Cry, Darksiders, Arkham, and other different elements as a collage together. Now, I do want to take a lot of influence from Oogie's Revenge when it comes to combat. Obviously, I do want to take a musical approach, but I want to take the rhythm game elements out of it, because I do think we can work in all these different styles of combat systems and fuse them all together in some aspects. I do want there to be a bit of a musical element, but taking out the rhythm-based stuff and making it more like Arkham in some aspects, mixing that with Darksiders and Hogwarts Legacy, and a little bit of Devil May Cry with Oogie's Revenge being at the core of combat, I feel that this could work as a system. Now, obviously, trying to fuse all these different styles of combat that are uniquely different into one singular system would be relatively hard, but that's just how I think the combat could work. It would have this musical element, using the core aspects of certain combat systems that I feel that worked all together. The idea of moving from enemy to enemy and using different combos from Arkham with the hack and slash nature of Devil May Cry and being creative with your combat, the flexible movement and the crunchy combat of Darksiders 2 and 1, and the ability to switch different forms from Darksiders 3 but removing the Dark Souls element out of it. Combat would still have this musical element from moving to enemy and being naturally creative with how you attack them and stuff like that. But if you get hit, very similar to Arkham and Devil May Cry, it does lessen the effect of things, and you get less points and other stuff. Each type of enemy has a different type of strategy to defeat it, which I'll get into later, but it adds that complexity. In a similar facet to how Arkham did, I want this system to be very similar, where the more you attack enemies, the quicker you do it, and the more creative you are with your combos, very similar to Devil May Cry and Arkham, more XP that you would earn. And obviously with your other forms, it would change up your combat drastically. So you're switching between these different forms, and you can have other weapons and other different things that you can use at your disposal in combat, like side weapons, your main weapons, and various other stuff, like your special magic attacks, which in your base form you have 2, and your other forms you have 1, and they're very unique in how they operate. Arkham's special combat takedowns in some aspects, but with some twists to make them a little bit different in how you can engage and use them. Because I do like the simplicity of combat being kind of similar to a dance, let's actually get into weapons because they're a big part of combat. Starting with the Halloween sign. This is one of your melee weapons that is enchanted with Halloween magic, which you can shapeshift it very similar to Rebellion into various different weapons like an axe, some swords, a spear, and other stuff. It's very versatile and you can use it in many ways. The axe is relatively very slow, but very similar to the axe in the reboot, is an increase in damage even though it's a very slow weapon, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. With your long range weapon being your soul robber, very similar to your Halloween sign, this weapon is a callback to Oogie's Revenge, but it's going to be slightly tweaked to be a little bit more of a collage-page long-range weapon that can be used in various ways, but it's not as overpowered as the original one. You also have your frog gun, which is a callback to the Pumpkin King, your batarangs, and your flaming jack-o'-lanterns, with some of your side weapons actually being affected by your different forms. And speaking of, let's kick things off with Jack's base form, or his regular form, the most balanced form out of all 4 forms. Not having too many edges, but also kind of not having too many weaknesses as well. Unlike with the other forms where there is a trade-off, in this form it's regularly balanced, so there's not much of a trade-off, but there isn't too much to give it an edge either. But in this form you do have a special ability, or 2 of them. Unlike with the other forms where you do have only 1 special ability, the base form has 2, your Scare Factor ability and also your Bat ability. This ability is regularly unique. Very similar to Batman's Bat Swarm ability, it actually has the ability in combat to create a swarm of bats when you're attacking enemies and stuff like that, which was one of the original ideas I had for this ability, but I actually came up with a secondary concept, where your bat bow tie takes over and you become a Halloween bat, which you can attack enemies and do different stuff, and a swarm of bats can swarm and attack enemies as well. Obviously in this form you do have the ability to take off your head and use it briefly in combat with a special combo that you can buy in the upgrade menu. And obviously with this form, the durability and the combat strength are relatively balanced. Obviously you can be very quick in your movement, being kind of like a contortionist, because of course Jack is like a spider with the way you can dodge. So this form is kind of balanced with your combat, and you have 2 special abilities compared to the other ones, and obviously your movement speed and other stuff is relatively balanced compared to the other ones. And obviously your magic meter does run out in this form, just like your other forms, or at least only one of them it doesn't. Let's actually get into that. Now moving on to the Scarecrow or the Pumpkin King form, this form is very unique because it does have a trade-off to it. You can take less damage, but you can dish it out tenfold, but obviously you have less weaponry and you have more access to fire-based abilities and movement, taking a bit of inspiration from the fire form from Darksiders 3. And obviously that changes up your movement ever so slightly, taking a lot of influence from the Pumpkin King game, Infamous, and also various other things. You can turn into a comet, launch upwards, very similar to the Darksiders 3 fire form, but it does come at a cost of your movement, being a lot more clunky and kind of like walking around on stilts or trying to use roller skates. The movement is a lot more clunky, but you can do a lot more damage with your fire-based attacks and weaponry. Being able to superheat some of your weapons, even set yourself on fire to really do a lot more damage. In this form, you can take less damage and even use a lot more fire-based attacks like explosions and stuff like that, very similar to Oogie's Revenge, and even being able to change up your jack-o'-lanterns and superheat them. Obviously in this form you do have a torch as a weapon that you can use, even being able to spit fire at enemies, set other enemies on fire, and obviously you take less damage and are pretty much immune to fire damage. In this form you can take a lot less damage and superheat some of your weapons with fire-based attacks, but obviously it comes at a cost of your movement, being a lot more clunkier and slow, but it doesn't change the fact that this form is very fun to use with your fire-based attacks for not just puzzles, but also in combat, and its massive changes to the gameplay formula. Moving on to one of my other favorite forms in my own original form creation, Now moving on to my own original form, the Shadow form, taking a lot of inspiration from the Force form from Darksiders 3, taking a little bit of influence from Oogie Boogie and Dr. Facilier, and a little bit of the Boogeyman from Rise of the Guardians. I thought it would be fairly perfect to make a form based around darkness and shadows, and I thought when you can blend into the darkness and become literal shadows, it can really add on to the aesthetic and move very fast and blend into the darkness. Being able to use dark-based attacks and a lot of different other stuff to really add an advantage. I personally wanted to have a bit of a trade-off. This form is relatively weaker, but it's a little quicker in some regards, but you lose access to your legs. You also lose access to your weaponry in some regards, losing access to your sign and other stuff for it to be a part of you in some aspects. Your sign and your soul robber are actually infused with your combat, so your combat becomes very similar to like Shadow from Devil May Cry, and also you have wings that you can briefly glide for your traversal. You have other various traversal options, being able to blend into shadows, and other various things that you can use. Darkness has become your ally in a lot of different ways. Moving on to your final form. Last but certainly not least, Jack's Santa form. Now, this was the form that I had to relatively be kind of creative with, because in Oogie's Revenge, the combat for this form was kind of lame. You just reached in your sack and you're just throwing out presents, and that was really the extent of it. And I thought, wow, you know, that kind of sucks. Why couldn't you do so much more with it? And I wanted this to be a natural upgrade from what we got there. Now, obviously, this is a late game form, and you only unlock it through a special side mission that is a flash forward. This form you can actually unlock any unused areas or any areas that you haven't explored yet due to puzzles or certain other things, and also you'll have access to special late game side missions that you can only access in this form and fight bosses and other various things. Now when it comes to the combat of this form, I wanted to change it up from what we originally got in Oogie's Revenge. In that game, the Santa Jack outfit or costume or just power was just throwing out random presents, and that was the full extent of it, and I thought that was kind of lame. So I wanted to change this up, and I didn't want it to be a copy of what we got from your base form, where that form's a lot more balanced. This is a weaker version of it. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit weaker, but its combat options and its combat versatility are upped heavily. You have a lot more options in this form compared to your base form. And you have different weapons that you could equip. Your base sign can actually turn into a candy cane, which it can shapeshift with Christmas magic compared to Halloween magic. And also you have another weapon that you can equip, your Santa Sack. Santa Sack acts as a more unpredictable weapon. Instead of just throwing out random presents, you can actually use toys in combat, not just in your traversal, but your combat as well. Changing up your side weapons and your base weapons to be more Christmas holiday themed. But let's actually get into enemies. I actually had to get relatively creative when it comes to the enemies, because I did want to have a lot of them be callbacks to Oogie's Revenge, and also a few bug enemies from the Pumpkin King game on the Game Boy. But I obviously wanted to have some brand new enemies, and I wanted to take a more Devil May Cry 5 approach where there's an interesting strategy to defeat each enemy. Now, some of the more newer enemies are actually based in the concept art for Nightmare Before Christmas. You have your basic skeletons, and also some brand new enemies like the Jack-in-the-Box, and a couple other ones that are callbacks to the concept art of Nightmare Before Christmas, with some various interesting abilities that really challenge you. Edgar even creating some enemies for you to fight as well. A lot of the enemies being very interesting and taking a different type of strategy or a different form or a different facet of combat to really take on and fight throughout the story. And speaking of the story, let's get into that. Now, when it comes to the story, I actually picture this game's story as a prequel. I'm going to be pulling a lot from the Pumpkin King game on the Game Boy while simultaneously pulling from the graphic novel, The Battle for the Pumpkin King book. Now, this game I would see as a prequel, and I want to tell a very interesting tale that fits in with the Nightmare Before Christmas universe. Now, in Nightmare Before Christmas, Jack is dealing with Halloween fatigue. He wants to add something new to it, and that's what inspires him the idea of Christmas and his natural curiosity. Well, I want to kind of establish that with this game. I want to set up his Halloween fatigue in Nightmare Before Christmas while also setting up this interesting arc where he doesn't really know what Halloween is. It's a very Grinch-like arc, but not completely, where he loves Halloween and he's been a part of the town for so long, but he really doesn't understand the holiday, which kind of parallels with Oogie Boogie and also Edgar, the main villain of the game, which he'll get into in a little bit. Now, Jack's arc is really about understanding Halloween and embracing what he is to become, and that is the new Pumpkin King. It's fairly similar to The Rise of the Guardians, where Jack Frost tries to understand his purpose in all things. Well, I want to have a similar arc with some added tweaks to it. What is Halloween about? And that's really the center of certain aspects of this story, where could it be something more darker or could it be a little bit lighter? What is it truly at its core? That's really the best part of this story. Now, obviously there are other characters, starting with Oogie Boogie. Now, this version of Oogie Boogie is yet to become the monster that we all know and love. Obviously, in the story, to pull from the Battle of the Pumpkin King book, he and Jack are friends, but they slowly become rivals and enemies. Oogie throughout the story slowly becomes this monster, manipulated by Edgar and slowly corrupted, and really is the tragic victim of the story. Yes, he becomes this monster and the antagonist throughout, motivated by greed and jealousy of Jack, but he's not really the villain of the story in some regards. He's an antagonistic force throughout the middle half of the game, and he's even helped Jack out throughout certain parts of the game, even giving him access to his shadow form. But just like Doc Ock, he becomes the tragic antagonist of the game. Not the villain, but the tragic antagonist, where you can sympathize with his goals, but also you feel bad for him, but also you're angry at his betrayal and certain other moments that you share with him. Moving on to the villain of the game. Taking a lot from the Battle of the Pumpkin King graphic novel, which I had to expand on for this story, I wanted to have Edgar's goals be a little bit more complex and a little bit more interesting, to parallel Jack's goals from Nightmare Before Christmas, but be a dark reflection of what Jack's goal was. In that story, small spoilers, he acts like he's going to retire, but he really just wants to operate from the shadows and still retain power. And I like that, but I feel that's a little bit boring. So I actually wanted him to keep power forever and actually twist the goals of Halloween. His main goal is a very dark reflection of what Jack's was in Nightmare Before Christmas. He was inspired to turn Halloween as a holiday even darker, not joyful, not take on a new holiday, but make everything Halloween and retain and get so much power from the fear, from the darkness, and make Halloween even darker and change the purpose of it in some aspects. And also pulling a bit of an ego or an apocalypse, he would possess his successor and really take on the Pumpkin King role once again, but in a different body. Since his body is starting to fail, it's starting to die, and he's starting to get older, and he's doing this for so long, well, he's become a lot more cold and calculating and manipulative, and he's actually become a lot darker. His role in the story is actually to operate kind of like Palpatine, where he plays these little mind games, manipulating Jack in some moments, but also slowly twisting Jack and Oogie against each other, and manipulating Boogie throughout the game, kind of being that Anakin Skywalker and Palpatine type of relationship. And he has many faces. He can be a kind-hearted old man, or a pumpkin, and a dark, vicious psychopath in another minute in private. So, in some aspects, the idea of this story pulls a lot from the Battle of the Pumpkin King and the Pumpkin King game, and fuses them together for a very different story that takes a lot of aspects from Nightmare Before Christmas lore and fuses them together. Once Jack defeats Edgar, he actually takes on the moniker of the Master of Fright, the new Pumpkin King, and it also sets into motion the events of Nightmare Before Christmas afterwards. So this game could be considered canon, or it could be considered not. This kind of video was just made for fun anyways, and it's just my idea of how I would do a new Nightmare Before Christmas game. Because, obviously, I would make this game a prequel, and I would do a lot of interesting stuff where you could do a bit of Arkham Origins-like stuff when it comes to the story. All of these are just my ideas. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. This took me a very long time to put together, edit, and record. It took several different attempts, so make sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you like my ideas, hate my ideas. Let me know how you would do things as well. I did do a lot of the asset making and a lot of the art for this video, and a few of the other art pieces that aren't mine, I actually will leave linked in the description to credit the original artist or person that made them. Big thank you to you guys, and also some people, or special people, that helped me get this video really off the ground. A friend and editor, Dead, also Celeste for helping me with a few art pieces, and also Wolf as well on Twitter, and also all you guys for really inspiring me to make more videos and stuff like that. So I really hope you guys have a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday season. Take care of yourselves. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel and me. And also check out some of the links in the description for all updates and other stuff. You can check out the Discord and other stuff. And check out any other videos on the channel, like my Arkham video, my Devil May Cry videos, or any other future videos that will appear on the channel. I have some big plans, and peace out. Bye-bye.